Very nice to meet you.
The Chancellor was trying to get in a mouthful of tea as she talked up her policies. But selling a budget with £26 billion of tax rises isn't always easy. This budget has entwined the fate of Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, so they have to hype up enthusiasm in every quarter they can get.
I'm really looking forward to getting your views on the budget and many other things.
Don't talk to me about the budget.
Well, they said they weren't going to increase taxes, and, well, they are.
We're being penalised for working hard in life.
We're caught in the middle. If you're in the middle, you're just not there.
I don't think any of us can afford the higher taxes.
It doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for the modern family. You've got two parents that are trying to work full time, kids in school, paying for after school club, before school club, childcare, and you've got nothing to show for it.
Today, think tanks highlighted the pressure created on household incomes. They also suggested that back-ending all tax rises to the end of Parliament, hitting £26 billion just before the next election, made them vulnerable to political U-turns. This has been a much more traditional Labour budget. High taxes, high spending, investment on welfare. It'll keep Labour MPs happy for now, and it seems to have quelled financial markets. But ultimately, it'll be about whether for British voters this budget stacks up. Chancellor, do you have a sense of relief this morning?
Oh, well, I've been up since 10 to 5 this morning, so it feels like I've had quite a lot of day already. Look, I was really proud of my budget yesterday. I believe I made the fair and necessary choices to cut the cost of living, to cut NHS waiting lists and cut our debt and borrowing. But obviously, you know, the budget is the biggest day of the year for the Chancellor.
Prime Minister's talking this morning about Labour MPs selling this budget. Will this budget get them off your back?
Well, I want MPs to be out campaigning this weekend on the package that I announced yesterday, £150 off of people's energy bills, and also lifting 450,000 kids out of poverty through the removal of the two-child limit. So, look, there's plenty for Labour MPs, Labour activists to go out and campaign on, because it was a budget that is good for families in our country.
You can argue the semantics, but dragging 750,000 people into the basic rate of income tax and almost 1 million people into the higher rate, that is raising tax on working people. You said you wouldn't, but you have.
I do recognise that freezing the thresholds from 2028 does mean that working people will contribute a bit more.
Is that a break in the promise?
Well, in the manifesto, it said we wouldn't increase the rates of income tax, national insurance or VAT, but I'm not denying that this is asking people to contribute a bit more.
Is growth still the main priority, or has politics taken over?
Growth is the #1 priority of this government. That's why we're doing trade deals with India, the US and the European Union. It's why the planning and infrastructure bill will get royal assent next month to make it easier to get stuff built in Britain. It's why I had a significant package for entrepreneurs yesterday with more favourable tax treatment for raising finance.
Entrepreneurs you're hitting with a mansion tax, though.
Well, I do think if you have a property that's worth more than £2 million, it's not right that you actually pay less council tax in many London boroughs than you do on a semi in Sunderland or Hartlepool.
What do you say to your critics who say you're now spending an extra £9 billion on welfare by the end of this Parliament? How is that justifiable?
We do need to do more to ensure that everybody who can work is working. That's why we've got Alan Milburn doing a review for us on
Will that
youth
review result in a reduction in welfare spending?
Well, the best way to reduce welfare spending is get more people into work, and when they are in work, being paid enough to be able to afford to live on.
But getting wages up has put Labour in the crosshairs of business, who have complained bitterly over bearing the brunt of last year's tax raid. To give them a concession, tonight the government finally shifted ground on its landmark legislation on employment rights, abandoning its attempts to give employees protection from unfair dismissal from day one.
How about you?
The climb down, perhaps a reflection of the fear the economy could be faltering with unemployment set to rise. The budget has survived first contact with the real world. But how many voters are really prepared to pay higher taxes?
Well, let's get some more reaction now to that government U-turn on workers' rights. As we've heard, ministers have abandoned plans to give workers day one protection against unfair dismissal in a bid to ensure the Employment Rights Bill makes it through Parliament. Our senior political correspondent, Paul McNamara, is in Westminster for us now. Paul.
Yep. Here's the manifesto, 17 months old, page 45, introducing basic rights from day one, protection from unfair dismissal. Ditched. What they're going for now is introducing that after 6 months. Now, in truth, this is slightly less controversial than a U-turn of this magnitude may sound. It's been having a sticky time, the Employment Rights Bill having a sticky time going through Parliament. There's been 2 votes in the House of Lords recently, both in favour of 6 months. So after extensive talks with business groups and, crucially, unions, that's the compromise the government has plumped for. This evening, the Trades Union Congress has issued a statement saying, look, the bill in its entirety is the main thing. Getting it on the statute books is what's important for them. That gives the government cover. It's not the universal view of unions, though. The left-leaning Unite Union has said the Employment Rights Bill is a shell of its former self. Talking to left-leaning MPs, they're quite angry. On the whole, though, a lot of MPs say, no, this is a compromise they can work with. There is one thing that irks them, though. More than one of them has said to me, look, slipping this out on a Thursday evening as they're all traipsing back to their constituencies, the day after the budget, when everyone's still talking about that, ain't a great look. All this has broken in just the last hour. I spoke to the Prime Minister earlier on. It was before I had a chance to, before this news had broke, so I couldn't ask him about that. But I did ask him about something else from his manifesto. At last year's budget, the Chancellor said freezing income tax thresholds would breach the manifesto. This year she did it. After last year's budget, she said, quote, she's not coming back for more borrowing and taxes. This year she did it. Now, I'm not asking for the reasons behind it, because I know we've already had those from everyone. We already know them. But yes or no, is this the last big tax rising budget which your Chancellor has to deliver?
Let me deal with the challenge that you put to me. First, it's clear that we haven't breached the manifesto if you look at the terms of the manifesto.
Last year she said it was going to be a breach of the manifesto. This is nuanced.
Let me be clear, we are asking everybody to contribute. We've tried to keep that as low as possible. The reason we're doing that, and we're doing it in a fair way, is to ensure that we do have the money to protect our NHS and have an NHS which is there for people when they need it. We need to invest in our schools, which have been left in a terrible state, so every child can go as far as their talent will take them, and we need to bear down on the cost of living. And one of the things we were able to announce yesterday is the £150 on average off all energy bills across the country, because energy bills are one of the bills that people worry most about. So we've taken the necessary but fair decisions that can take our country forward.
That's all great, but that's not what I asked you. Is this the last time you have to rise taxes?
Well, we've done everything we can to put in headroom in this budget to make sure that we've stabilised the economy, and we're already seeing some of the evidence of that, because the growth that was predicted for 2025, the economic growth, which in the end is wealth creation, was predicted this time last year at 1%. Yesterday, the OBR said the number was 1.5%. So we've defeated that forecast by 50%. That's the spirit in which we go forward from this budget.
Prime Minister, you seem to pick and choose when you want to be straight with voters. Do you think this is part of the reason why voters say they don't know what you stand for, why your popularity is at a record low, and why many of your MPs want rid of you?
There's a whole room full of voters here. And when you finish with me, you should go and talk to them.
We've got them handpicked. Lots of voters don't like the Prime Minister at the moment.
They want to know, what are you doing about the cost of living? That's not peculiar to this hall. That's a discussion right across the country. What are you doing to protect our NHS?
They also know you're going to raise taxes, and you haven't answered that.
These are the issues that they raise over and over again. And they want to see a government that says we're pulling every available lever when it comes to cost of living. And they absolutely want to know, what are you doing to make sure our NHS is there for us when we need it? These are the central concerns, and that's why in this budget we've taken a fair approach, but we've rooted it in what so many people across the country say matters most to them.
Prime Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, joining me now is the economist Paul Johnson. He's the former director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the influential economics research organisation, and he's now provost of Queen's College, Oxford. Paul, let's talk about that U-turn first. Businesses getting their way effectively on workers' rights. Will that have some kind of boost to the economy, do you think?
Well, businesses are getting their way to some extent. There's clearly a lot of additional rights that's coming through, and I think this is a very sensible change. Full rights against dismissal on day one was always, I think, a step too far. So that will, not implementing that will, as it were, avoid a negative impact on employment and growth.
Right. Well, let's talk about the budget more generally, because it seems pretty clear, doesn't it, that this was a budget about political survival, not economic growth. Is that your take?
Well, there wasn't a lot in there for growth specifically. I think what the Chancellor was trying to do was at least twofold. One was find additional money for increasing welfare spending, the two-child limit, the disability benefit, U-turns. So there's £10 billion or so of additional spending there, which she had to raise in additional taxes. And then she's built a bit of a buffer against her, a little bit of a buffer against her fiscal target. So it's less likely, I hope, that we have all of this months and months of speculation next year about what the tax rises might be. So that in itself is a positive. But you look at the sort of whole range of the changes, it's very hard to discern a real strategy there for growth or indeed for anything else.
Right. And in your long experience of budgets, not to make you sound, old, obviously, but, tax rises to fund higher spending, it sounds incredibly old Labour. Is that your experience?
Well, I mean, the last government, the last Conservative government, also had quite a lot of tax increases to fund quite big spending increases. And if you look at this decade as a whole, I think it's really important to step back and look at this decade as a whole. This is an astonishing decade. I mean, this is the decade in which the British state grew by 5% of national income. That's huge, by £150 billion. That much more spending, that much more tax, some of it down to the last government, a lot of it down to this government. That's a historic change, because for decades before that, it hadn't grown in anything like that way.
I mean, Liz Truss tried to change that and everything went mad in the market. So is this the model we're stuck with, for better or for worse, whether you like it or not?
Well, of course, Liz Truss didn't try to change anything on the spending side, and indeed she accompanied her very big tax cuts with an enormous spending splurge, particularly on supporting people's fuel bills at the time, and with a claim that at some point down the road she might come back with some view about how to cut spending. So our challenge now is, of course, that we've got this high level of tax and spending. It doesn't feel like public services are brilliant, and we've got more challenges as the population ages. We spend more on defence, we spend more on health coming down the road.
But is there scope to change that, or is whichever government we get next has to sort of stick with what we've got? Give us a scope.
Well, there are clearly choices. I mean, this government has chosen not to cut winter fuel allowances. It's chosen not to cut disability benefits. It's chosen to reinstate the two-child limit and so on. So there are clearly choices there. There are choices elsewhere, which I suspect the electorate don't want to make, but there are choices about paying less to public sector workers, about having
and the triple lock, for example,
doing less in the health service, about replacing or getting rid of the triple lock. So there are choices there. None of them like to be popular. But if you want to avoid, as it were, ever increasing taxes, you need to make some of those choices.
Right, so let's talk about welfare then, because the Tories say, well, welfare spending is out of control. Keir Starmer's answer is, well, now we've lifted hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty. Are they both true? What's your view on that?
Well, I don't think welfare spending is out of control. I think there's a sort of almost a moral panic about the level of welfare spending. So if we just look at the working age welfare bill, it hasn't changed very much over decades if you look at it as a fraction of national income. Now, there is a part of that welfare bill which is out of control, and that is the spending on disability benefits in particular. And that, I think we really do need to do something about that. And that, as I say, is what the government has chosen not to do. But you look at the overall level, I think we want to calm down a little bit about the idea that it's out of control.
Right. And a lot of the tax rises that Rachel Reeves introduced are actually deferred until 2028. So mansion tax, for example. Is there any prospect, in your view, of growth to stop her having to make those tax rises happen?
Well, of course, growth might happen. I mean, the truth is that it's not enormously under the control of the government. So we may have a tech boom, we may have trade getting better because President Trump sort of reneges on some of his tariffs. It may be that things go better in the rest of the world.
But we might have a war, a war that embroils Britain.
There might be an upside, but there might also be a downside. I think that the sorts of tax rises that have been announced, it's not surprising they've been deferred. It was going to take a long time to sort out the value of the houses. It's going to take a long time to work out how to make the electric vehicle charge work. And of course, the freezing allowances years ahead is something that both governments have done over a long period of time. We should also be aware that I think there's a bigger challenge for the government, is that the government's also being really, really tight on public service spending in that year before the election. So part of the way they've rebuilt that fiscal headroom is to say, we're going to basically cut public services in that year. That's the bit I find really hard to believe.
Yeah, well, we haven't even talked about education, which is a whole other story. But Paul Johnson, thanks very much for joining us.